The year was 1865, and the frontier was a land of both opportunity and death. Dust flew like ghosts across the Montana plains, whispering stories of blood and gold, of lost men and tougher women. On a quiet patch of earth, just north of Dead Horse Creek, stood a modest homestead, 3 fences, 1 barn, and a 2-room cabin with more scars than paint. Clara Talbot rose before the sun, as she always did, tying back her chestnut hair with a leather string, fingers calloused from years of labor. Her boots crunched over frostbitten grass, and the breath from her lips fogged in the early light. The horses, Buck, Jasper, and the young mare she hadn't named yet, snorted as she approached with feed. She moved with practiced silence, every gesture worn smooth with grief and necessity. Her husband, William, had built the barn with his own hands, shaping timbers with quiet pride and knotted strength. He died just 1 year past, gunned down by drunken drifters who wanted his coin purse and left him bleeding in the sawdust of Harper's General. Clara had buried him with her own hands. She hadn't cried, not then. Tears, like bullets, were best saved for moments that mattered. She stood for a moment beside Buck, brushing his thick hide, eyes drifting east toward the rising sun. Somewhere out there, beyond the hills and pines, the world still moved on. Wars ending, trains being laid, men becoming myths. But here, the rhythm was simpler. Feed, mend, survive. The quiet cracked like a whip. Clara froze, ears sharpening. Hoofbeats. Fast ones. Coming hard from the south. She stepped back into the barn's shadow, instinct curling her fingers around the old Sharp's rifle leaning by the wall. Her heart thudded once, twice, steady and slow. She had learned not to panic. Panic got you dead. The riders came into view, 3 of them. Dust-cloaked, faces hidden behind bandanas, hats pulled low. Not cowhands. Not travelers. The lead man rode a black gelding with a silver concho on his saddle-horn, and something about the way he sat, too relaxed, too sure, made Clara's gut twist. They didn't slow as they approached. Just veered straight into her yard like they owned the place. The lead man dismounted, boots landing with a crunch. His voice was a drawl soaked in whiskey and bad intentions. "Well now, what do we have here?" Clara stepped out slowly, rifle resting casual-like in her arms. Her voice didn't tremble. "You're trespassing." One of the other riders chuckled. The third, short, twitchy, kept glancing toward the barn. "We ain't looking for trouble, miss," the leader said, smiling with teeth too white for honest work. "Just noticed you've got some mighty fine horses. Thought we'd offer you a trade." "Not for sale." "Oh, I wasn't thinking of coin," he said, stepping forward. "I got something better. Protection. Ain't safe for a lady out here on her own. Lot of bad men roam these parts." Clara didn't move. "I've met a few." His smile faded a shade. The air tightened. "You deaf, woman? We're talking the horses. You can keep your damn chickens." The twitchy one moved first, reaching for his gun. Clara fired. The shot cracked through the still morning like thunder. Too slow. Her bullet slammed into the dirt by his feet. Not a miss, a warning. She could have taken his leg clean off. That was her choice. But the moment had already snapped. The lead man's gun was drawn. She ducked behind a barrel as shots rang out, wood splintering around her. She fired again, hit one of them, she thought, maybe grazed his arm. A scream confirmed it. "Bitch shot me." "Shut up and get the damn horses." Footsteps pounded toward the barn. Clara sprinted through the smoke, vaulting over a feed trough, and kicked the door shut just as the twitchy one tried to drag it open. Buck neighed in panic. Clara shoved a pitchfork through the latch, buying seconds, maybe less. She turned and fired through a slat in the wood. Another wild scream. But there were too many of them, and they weren't stupid. "Oil." She smelled it. "No, no, don't you." A bottle sailed through the air. It smashed against the barn wall, spreading fire like orange fingers. They lit it. Flames roared to life, licking dry wood. Clara screamed for the horses, tried to cut the gate, but Buck had already bolted. The younger mare thrashed, panicked, then burst through the far stall into the open, chased by the heat and chaos. The outlaws were gone as fast as they came, thundering off with their prize. Buck, Jasper, and the mare vanished in a trail of dust and smoke. Clara stood barefoot in the yard, her nightdress torn, rifle empty, watching her barn collapse in on itself. Smoke stung her eyes, but still she did not cry. She pulled her shawl tight against her shoulders as the fire died down to embers, then walked into the ruin. Blackened beams lay strewn like bones. She stepped over a collapsed rafter, picked up what remained of William's saddle. It was half-burned, leather fused to the wood. She held it close. By nightfall, the air was thick with ash and silence. Clara sat on the porch with a bottle of rye whiskey and a single bullet resting in her palm. That bullet had a name now. She didn't know the men's names, but she'd remember their faces. The silver concho. The twitchy little bastard with a scar above his lip. The one she'd wounded. He'd limp now, she hoped. Grief curled around her chest like barbed wire. This place, this land, had already taken her husband. Now it had taken the only thing she had left, his horses, their pride, their legacy. They'd been born on this land, trained by his hands, ridden only by her since. She wanted to weep. She wanted to burn the whole damn world down. Instead, she stood, walked inside, lit a single lamp. She found her husband's old satchel, packed it with dry meat, hardtack, and a half-used roll of bandages. She wrapped her knife in cloth and tucked it beside the bullets. The Sharp's rifle she cleaned and loaded with the last 5 rounds she had. She strapped her boots tight and knelt at the hearth, one hand resting on the stone where she'd carved her initials next to his. "I'll be back," she whispered, "or I'll die trying." The next morning, before the sun had fully broken the horizon, she walked the perimeter of the farm one last time. The barn was still smoking. Her chickens clucked nervously, sensing something shifting in the air. The wind carried the scent of cinders and pine. She found the trail with ease. The outlaws hadn't bothered to cover their tracks. Arrogance made men sloppy. Deep hoofprints marked the edge of the field, heading south, toward Devil's Tooth Ridge. Clara followed them. Each step forward was another piece of the old her falling away, Clara the wife, the homemaker, the ghost in a dress. Now she was Clara the hunter. By noon, she had reached the scrubby edge of the foothills, where the grass grew thin and rocks jutted like teeth. She paused only to sip water from a cracked canteen and adjust her pack. Her eyes stayed on the trail, broken branches, blood droplets from the wounded one, a whiskey bottle left half buried in mud. They were careless. Good. She'd be patient, careful. At night, she built no fire. Instead, she lay under the stars with the rifle across her chest and the saddle blanket beneath her head. Wolves howled in the far distance, and she didn't flinch. Fear was a luxury she no longer needed. By the 3rd day, she reached an abandoned mining trail and found a man's bootprint crushed into the clay beside a pine tree. The heel was worn in a peculiar way, off-kilter, a hitch in the gait. The one she shot. She knelt and touched the print. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "And I'm coming." She walked until the land changed. The scrub gave way to hardpan and jagged rock, and the sun grew hotter with each hour. She was low on water. Her legs ached. Her lips cracked. But she kept moving. She spoke only once more in that long silence between days. She was kneeling beside a creek, washing blood from a rabbit she'd caught with a snare, when a shadow passed overhead. A hawk, circling. Clara looked up and said, almost to herself, "You took everything from me. So now I'll take everything from you." A promise spoken not to the wind, but to the fire still smoldering behind her ribs. And somewhere, out there on the plains, 3 outlaws rode with stolen horses and the belief that the past could not follow them. They were wrong. The days grew harsher as Clara pressed deeper into the wilds. Her boots, worn at the soles, bit into shale and root, but she did not falter. Hunger clawed at her ribs, thirst sanded her throat, and yet she moved like a woman possessed. The wind was sharp in the hills, laden with pine and smoke, and the land seemed to lean in, watching. A rabbit roasted over a low flame, skewered on a green branch. She kept the fire small, shielded from view. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Her jaw had set into a hard line days ago. She chewed slowly, eyes never still, scanning the ridges, listening for hoofbeats or the click of spurs. She hadn't seen another soul in nearly 4 days. It was on the 5th that she saw the first sign. Blood, dried and rust-colored, stained a boulder along a narrow game trail. Below it, the earth bore the same off-angled boot print she had tracked for miles. The wounded one was slowing. She crouched beside it, touching the stone. Still tacky. A day. Maybe less. They weren't far now. Her breath caught at the sound. Leaves crunching. Not hoofbeats. Lighter. A footfall. She dropped behind the boulder, rifle in hand, eyes narrowing. Another rustle. A figure stepped from the trees, tall, lean, skin sun-worn and weather-creased. He moved like a panther, silent, alert. Long black hair tied back, a bow slung across his back, a knife strapped to his thigh. His gaze cut straight to where she crouched. "You're not very quiet," he said. Clara rose slowly, not lowering the rifle. Wasn't trying to be. He didn't blink. "You've been following a blood trail for 3 days. You aim to kill whoever's leaking it." "I do." "Good," he said. "So do I." They stood in silence for a beat, two strangers staring across the divide, measuring weight and worth. The man took a step forward, hands visible. His voice was even. "Name's Elias. You?" "Clara." "What did they take from you?" "My horses," she said. "And, before that, my husband." He nodded once, solemn. "They took my sister. Month ago. Left her in a creek near Red Hollow." The pain hung between them, different losses, same burn. Clara lowered her rifle. "You tracked them long?" Elias looked to the west. "Long enough to smell their stink a day before I see it. They made camp that night in a canyon cleft, sheltered by stone." Elias gathered dry moss and lit a smokeless fire with flint and calm skill. He said little, but what words he gave were sharp and useful. Clara liked that. There was no room for softness out here. They shared hardtack and silence. "You shoot?" he asked. "Well enough. I'll see in the morning." At dawn, he tested her. Set up 3 stones across a dry riverbed. She hit the first, missed the second, clipped the third. "You flinch when the wind shifts," he said, not unkindly. "You'll need to stop that. I wasn't raised a fighter. No one is. Till the world makes him." They followed the trail together, faster now with 2 sets of eyes. Elias pointed out signs Clara had missed, a broken branch too high for a deer, a boot scuff in the moss. He moved like he was part of the land. Clara envied it. She walked beside him with steel in her spine, learning as she listened. By dusk, they reached an old trading post, sun-bleached and half-fallen. A crooked sign read Larkspur Station, though no lark had sung here in years. 2 horses were tied outside. One was Buck. Clara froze. "Yours?" Elias asked. "Yes." Elias checked his knife. "Then we wait." They watched from behind a half-buried wagon, eyes locked on the saloon door. It creaked open. Out came 2 men, one laughing, the other limping, a rag tied around his thigh. Clara's heart clenched. "The wounded one. That's him." "You want him alive?"
"No."
Elias didn't smile, but he seemed to respect the answer. The men walked toward the horses. Elias rose, arrow knocked in one smooth motion. Clara stepped out, rifle raised. "Don't." The limping man turned too fast. Elias loosed his arrow. It struck the man clean through the chest. He fell without a sound. The second man went for his gun, but Clara was faster. The shot punched through his shoulder. He screamed, dropped to the dirt. Elias walked over, stepped on the man's gun hand, twisted the weapon away. "You know a man named Broderick?" The wounded man whimpered.
"Why, yeah."
"Yeah, he leads our crew. 5 of us. Base up near Devil's Tooth." Clara stepped closer, barrel inches from his head. "The silver concho. That's him." He nodded frantically. Don't kill me.
Please.
I didn't touch your horses. I didn't even want. Clara pulled the trigger. The body jerked once, then went still.
She didn't speak.
She just turned and untied Buck, brushing his muzzle like it was any other day. Elias tied the other horse to a post. We're 2 down. 3 to go. They rode for the ridge the next morning, pushing hard. The wind howled through the trees, carrying the stench of smoke and sweat. Buzzards circled in the distance. At the river crossing, Clara's horse slipped on wet stone, and she tumbled hard into the water. The current dragged her down. She fought, arms flailing, lungs burning. A shadow plunged after her. Strong arms caught her beneath the shoulders, dragged her back to shore. Elias knelt beside her, pounding her back until she coughed up water and bile. You good? He asked. She nodded, shaking, teeth chattering. Don't get dead. You're too close. She managed a weak smile. You dive in like that for every stubborn widow? Only the armed ones. They camped that night under the cliffs. Stars burned overhead. Clara sat beside the fire, shivering under her blanket. Elias tossed her a scrap of smoked venison. You're hard to kill, he said. So are you. He poked the fire with a stick. You ever killed before this? Only varmints and 1 rattler. You did fine at the post. I didn't feel fine. You won't. Not till you stop counting. She stared into the flames, remembering William's hands, calloused, kind. The way he used to hum when he saddled the horses. The last thing he said before he rode to town that day. Be back before dark. He never was. I don't want revenge, she whispered. I want them erased. Elias nodded. Then let's finish it. By noon the next day, they reached the outer hills of Devil's Tooth. Pines stood tall, silent sentinels over the land. Elias led her to a ridge overlooking a shallow valley. Smoke curled up from a small campfire below. 3 men lounged near bedrolls. One was cleaning a rifle. One was cooking something over the fire. The third, silver concho gleaming in the sun, sat with his back to them, carving into a chunk of wood with a Bowie knife. Clara's breath caught. That's him. Broderick, Elias said, voice like a curse. Clara looked at the landscape, natural choke points, the slope of the hill. We split. I circle west. You take the left ridge. You sure? She nodded. Time to finish this. Elias vanished like smoke. Clara crept down the hillside, heart hammering. Each step was deliberate. Her boots sank into soft pine needles. She held her breath. Then a twig snapped beneath her foot. The man at the fire turned. Who's there? Clara raised the rifle. Fired. He went down with a cry. Another lunged for his gun, but Elias's arrow caught him in the throat. Broderick spun, firing wildly into the trees. Clara dove behind a log, bullets whistling overhead. Come out, you damned witch. Broderick bellowed. I know who you are. Clara moved low, flanking him. He saw the shadow and turned too late. She tackled him, the rifle clattering away. They rolled in the dirt, fists flying, wild grunts and growls. Broderick slammed her against a tree, drew his knife. She headbutt him, felt the crunch of his nose. Blood spattered. He slashed. She caught his wrist, twisted hard. The knife fell.
She snatched it.
He grabbed her throat, squeezed. Die, you stubborn. She drove the blade up beneath his ribs. He shuddered, eyes wide. Then slumped. It was over. Clara stood over him, blood running down her arms, chest heaving. Elias limped toward her, hand pressed to his side. You're hurt, she said. Just a graze, he grunted. You? She looked down. Some bruises. Nothing else. They gathered what they could, ammunition, supplies, the stolen saddle. Clara tied the horses together, staring once more at the bodies cooling in the dirt. Elias crouched beside Broderick, pulling off the silver concho. You want it? She shook her head.
No.
He's not worth remembering. They rode in silence until dusk, then made camp by a quiet creek. The sky was painted with streaks of crimson and gold. Elias leaned against a log, breathing shallow. "You all right?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I've done what I came to do. You should rest." He nodded, eyes closing. "You keep that fire lit." "I will." As night settled over the hills, Clara sat watch. The stars above no longer looked distant. They looked close, almost familiar. In the firelight, her reflection danced in the blade of her knife. Not a widow anymore. A survivor. A warrior. And the trail wasn't done just yet. The wind had teeth that morning. It howled through Devil's Tooth Canyon like a pack of hungry wolves, dragging dust and old ghosts across the rocky pass. Clara tightened her scarf and pressed her palm against the cold barrel of her rifle. Her horse, Buck, shifted beneath her with unease, breath pluming white in the chill air. Below, the final outlaw camp sat in a cradle of boulders, tucked beneath the jagged stone that gave the ridge its name. Smoke rose from a fire pit. Tents flapped in the gusts. 3 men moved about, Broderick's lieutenants, the last of them. 2 she recognized from the raid on her farm. One tall, built like an ox, with a bristling red beard and a voice like gravel. The other thin and mean-eyed, the one who'd held her at gunpoint while the others set the fire. The third, she didn't know. A stranger. Didn't matter. He'd made his choice riding with them. Elias crouched beside her on the ridge, his shoulder wrapped in blood-streaked bandages. His face was pale, his breath shallow. "You shouldn't be here," Clara said. "And let you face them alone?" he rasped. "Not a chance. You're bleeding through." He gave a weak smile. "Then let's make this fast." They studied the terrain. The only path down was narrow, with no cover. A frontal assault meant death. But the wind was on their side. It would carry their scent east. And the canyon held a second path, a dry wash behind the rocks. Clara pointed. "I'll circle that way. Come in from the side." Elias nodded, pushing himself upright with a groan. "Give me 3 minutes. I'll draw him. Don't be a hero. Not today." She moved like a shadow, weaving between stones, boots barely touching the ground. Her heartbeat kept time with her steps, steady, sharp. The rifle in her hands felt lighter than it had in weeks. There was no fear now, only purpose. From the rocks above, Elias shouted, "Hey, bastards." Gunfire answered. Clara broke from cover. Her first shot hit the red-bearded giant in the chest, knocking him back into the fire. He flailed, screaming, then fell still. Another man turned, firing wild. She dove behind a rock, bullets cracking overhead. Dust sprayed her face. Her next shot hit his leg. He dropped, wailing, tried to crawl. The third man, the stranger, charged. She hadn't seen him move, hadn't expected him to be so fast. He crashed into her before she could fire again. The rifle flew from her hands, clattering against the stone. They tumbled down the embankment in a flurry of fists and grit. His blade flashed in the morning light. She caught his wrist, twisted. The knife dropped. He punched her hard, and stars exploded behind her eyes. Clara spat blood, reached for a rock, slammed it into his temple.
Once. Twice.
He fell limp. She rolled away, panting, vision blurred. Her ribs screamed, her knuckles burned. But she was alive. Footsteps. She turned, rifle raised. Elias staggered into view, face contorted in pain. "Got the shooter," he gasped. "Think that's all of them." Clara limped over to the fire. The red-bearded man was dead. The crawler was unconscious, or close to it. She towed his side, he didn't move. They searched the camp, took weapons, food, coins. Found papers, maps marked with excess, notes in poor handwriting. They were planning another raid, Elias muttered, scanning the scribbles. Over near Helena. Bastards didn't know when to stop. Clara knelt beside the fire and stirred the embers with her knife. They've stopped now. Elias sat heavily on a crate, breathing shallow. This it then? Clara nodded slowly. This is it. For a while, neither spoke. The wind settled into a hush. The canyon, once alive with danger, now held only stillness. "I buried my sister in snow," Elias said, voice hoarse. Didn't even have a stone to mark her. Just said her name and let the wind take it. I buried William under the cottonwood tree, Clara replied. He used to whistle while he chopped wood there. I haven't heard it since. Elias looked at her, something soft in his eyes. You think they'd be proud? Clara stared into the fire. I think they'd still be dead. And I think we're not. That's what matters now. The wounded outlaw moaned. Elias rose, swaying. Leave him, Clara said. Elias raised an eyebrow. She stood. Let him carry the story. Let someone remember this wasn't just killing. Elias didn't argue. He dropped the maps onto the man's chest. Clara saddled Buck and helped Elias onto the second horse. He winced, but stayed upright. They rode out of Devil's Tooth as the sun crested the ridge, painting the canyon in gold and blood. It was 2 days before they reached the valley again. The farm came into view as dusk settled, charred wood, broken fence, the scorched skeleton of the barn. Yet something in it felt different now. Not like ruin, like roots waiting for water. Clara helped Elias down. He groaned, leaning on her shoulder. You'll be all right, she said. I'm alive. That's enough. She led him to the porch, laid out a bedroll, brought water and bread. He slept like stone, breath steady, face finally at peace. She stayed up long after, sitting on the steps, rifle across her knees. Coyotes howled in the distance. The wind tugged at her coat. She watched the stars rise, one by one, like old gods blinking awake. And she thought about William, about the fire, about the weight of revenge, and the way it never truly lifts, it just settles deeper in your bones. She closed her eyes and listened. To the quiet, to the wind, to her own heartbeat, strong, relentless. When morning came, she walked the field where the horses used to graze. The earth was still hard from frost, but she could feel the promise in it. She knelt down and pressed her hand into the soil. It clung to her skin like memory. The sun warmed her back. For the first time in a long while, she felt it, not just heat, hope. Later, when Elias woke, she brought him a cup of strong coffee and stood by the door while he drank. So what now? He asked. I rebuild. He nodded. Need help? She shrugged. Got 2 hands. A hammer. Time. He smiled. I'll stay a few days. Make sure you don't fall off the roof. She didn't smile back, but her eyes softened. All right. He looked out across the horizon. You ever wonder if it'll all catch up to us?
It already did, she said.
We're still here. He raised the mug in a quiet toast. To that. And as the wind picked up again, tugging at the dry grass, carrying ash and dust and memory across the land, Clara Talbot stood tall on the porch of her broken farm, no longer just a widow, no longer prey, but something stronger. Something forged in fire and grit and blood. Not a ghost, not a legend, just a woman who survived the frontier and shaped it in turn.